Left in Kentucky, the podcast of Indivisible, Northern Kentucky, District 4. Welcome back for episode 5 of Left in Kentucky. We're glad you could join us. This is Roberto Enriquez.
And this is Amy Ferguson.
And Dickerson.
Not much going on as usual, pretty quiet in D.C. and pretty quiet here in the state. And oh wait, no, it's not. There's lots going on.
Surely you jest.
I smell some cow patties in the field.
I am jesting, and quit calling me Shirley. Let's start off with our cow patties. I think I heard somebody say that, so I think that's a good place to start. So my cow patty for this week, this episode, is Steve Mnuchin, who decided it was a good idea to mansplain to Annie Maxine.
Yeah.
And it went so well for him.
It didn't.
Yeah, it didn't. Him trying to tell her how to run the committee meeting. Well, first off, him going through this whole thing of, well, I have a hard stop and I have to leave for this meeting. Are you saying that I have to stay for this? And no, I'm saying you can do whatever you want to do, but you need to be here. And that whole back and forth was a huge waste of time. And then he decided to tell Maxine that she needed to use the gavel to move on.
No. Not the gavel. The gravel.
Oh, that's right. That's right. He said gravel. He said gravel. He said gravel. You need to use the gravel. We'll assume that he meant gavel.
I don't know. I kind of want to see a dump truck just unload
the gravel
in the middle of the house floor.
Maybe a gravel is what you make out of covfefe.
The world may never know.
Yeah. Hopefully we will never find out. Anyway.
So my cow patty, I will also give to something that happened in the House of Representatives. Our own congressman. Can you imagine? Mr. Massey, congratulations. You are the winner of my cow patty for this episode.
Way.
Yes. And if you didn't see it, do yourself a favor and Google it. You'll find it. Our congressman decided to take on John Kerry about climate change. And let's just say that he didn't come out looking like he knew what he was talking about. So yeah, do yourself a favor and check that out.
First off, he came off not sounding like he knew how the college system worked at all, what a degree was. And then they got into actual trying to talk about climate change and not understanding that 800,000 years ago was a lot different than.
Right. I don't think he got it when John kept saying humans weren't around then. I don't know. I mean, he's certainly an embarrassment to our district.
And of course, this may be the first time we've gone this way on this one.
Mm-hmm, I think it is.
Shockingly. But my cow patty award for the week goes to the granddaddy of them all, Mitch McConnell.
Yep.
For his just blatant, not only obstructionism, but I don't know what word I want to use here, for declaring that the net neutrality bill that passed in the House was dead on arrival in the Senate. Basically, he's not even going to call it to the floor. And when you look at who has given money to him, AT&T, Verizon, all these big companies, Comcast. Yeah. No wonder he doesn't want to bring it to the floor. He did their corporate bidding last year, and he ain't going back now.
Mitch does not work for us, people.
No, he certainly does not, and he has got to go next year. Mitch is bad.
He is very, very bad.
Definitely. So.
Bad turtle.
Nice.
Snap.
Oh, wow. All right. So that's our cow patties for this episode. And, do yourself a favor and look up the videos of some of these, especially the ones with Steve Mnuchin and with Thomas Massey. They're quite interesting to watch. So now we're going to start talking about the upcoming primary elections here in Kentucky. We have a number of positions up for election this year, and this episode we're going to talk about three of them. We're going to discuss three of them. We're going to talk about the Agriculture Commissioner, the Auditor of Public Accounts, and Treasurer. And we're going to talk about the Democratic candidates for each of those. So let's start with the Agriculture Commissioner candidates. And I thought it'd be a good idea, since people may or may not know what these positions actually do. Amy, why don't you drop some knowledge on us? What's the Agriculture Commissioner do?
Okay. So the Kentucky Commissioner of Agriculture is an elected state executive position in the Kentucky state government. So this is for the whole state of Kentucky. And the commissioner is responsible for expanding agricultural markets, increasing rural economic development, and promoting the Kentucky Proud program. And if you're not familiar with the Kentucky Proud program, it gives precedent to products that are made in Kentucky, usually through agriculture, and gives them tax breaks and things like that. And our farm actually has been a recipient of that. So I can talk about that.
Oh, excellent.
The Agricultural Commissioner is going to be one that'll be working with the farmers, basically.
All righty. And we have two Democratic candidates for this position. We have Robert Haley Conway and Joe Trigg. So first, let's spend some time talking about Robert Haley Conway. I believe, if memory serves, he's from Scott County and went to Georgetown High School and graduated from the University of Kentucky. He's been a farmer most of his life. One of the things that he really wants to focus on, and he's talked about a lot, is attracting young people to farming and small family farms. So what are your guys' impressions so far based on what you know of Robert?
I've talked to him. He's very passionate about farming. He's seems very concerned about the loss, especially of small family farms. And we all know, because we talked about it, I don't know how many times last year, all of the suffering that the different kinds of farmers in the state went through last year. Remember the whole deal with the dairy farmers and the Dean Foods contract getting canceled on them with no notice. Then there were the tariffs that, of course, really affected the soybean farmers.
Yes, I can speak to that. Yes.
Yeah. So, and other farmers across the state. So they've taken a lot of hits. And very recently, and the concern is that all of these family farms are going to go under. And, like you were talking about, Roberto, his farm has been in his family since 1876.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's a long time.
I mean, you're talking coming up on 150 years. Holy moly. But what there seems to be a general lack of, and I'll just shoot this out here now as we're going down this list, it applies to almost every candidate, regardless of position that we're going to speak about tonight. There's a severe, severe lack of issues that I'm seeing, or ideas.
There's no plan. There's no law or
how are we going to, here's some ideas of how we're going to fix a problem.
I don't even know if they're addressing problems. Like she said, there's a lack of issues. I think it doesn't even go that deep.
Well, I think one of the good issues that I think Robert brings up is talking about how hard it is to keep young people on farms.
Yes. And he is the one who brought out the fact that the average farmer in Kentucky is 60 years old. And that concerns him too, that less and less young people are getting into farming because they're seeing in real time all the suffering that's going on and how, hard it is to try to maintain year after year after year. And it's always dependent upon, who gets into office. So from that perspective, I mean, it's not that I disagree with his focus or think that it's a bad thing. I would just like to hear some more depth of ideas.
Right.
But I have that problem with a lot of our candidates this year.
I will say I've met Robert many times, and I like him very much.
Yeah.
But I just don't know what policies he wants to put in place. I
do know he's expressed support, I believe, for hemp and marijuana cultivation as a way to help farmers in Kentucky. I mean, he has a lot of background that's really interesting. He on the Scott County Beef Cattle Association, member of the Kentucky Farm Bureau, member of the Kentucky Cattlemen's Association. I mean, he seems to have a lot of agricultural related experience and background. Current district supervisor of the Scott County Soil and Water Conservation Board.
Right. Yes, his background in community service and public service is exemplary. I will say that. I see lots of focus on giving back to the community and especially farmers. So yeah, that is definitely a plus for Robert. He has given, served our community.
So if you're interested in more information on him, you can check out his website at www.conway4ky19.com. And we'll put these links in the description of this podcast. So if you want to check those out further, you can find those in the description of the podcast. So moving on to the next candidate for Agriculture Commissioner, we have Joe Trigg. Joe Trigg has really interesting background. He's former military, combat, peacetime, lifetime member of the Disabled American Vets. He is a Black Angus breeder and greenhouse manager, experience with tobacco contract labor. So he has a fair amount of agricultural background. He has a farm, not an 8-generation farm since the 1860s, but definitely does run a farm. So what are you guys' impressions of Mr. Trigg?
My impression on meeting Mr. Trigg, I was very impressed. He is also someone that cares about our community and our small farmers and small farms. He's very pro hemp and pro medical marijuana, which I think that would be a great source of revenue for this state. So our agricultural commissioner being behind that is an important thing, I think. And I do believe that Joe would speak for the small farmers.
He also has experience with hydroponic and aquaponic gardening, so definitely something that's a little more on the innovation and forward-looking part of agriculture. He also has a BS in computer science, so I think it'll be interesting to see the technology and advancement that he might be able to bring into the position.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I like him a lot. I think of all the candidates, he's probably one of the most forward-thinking. His biggest problem, truth be told, is name recognition and campaigning. Mm-hmm. He just isn't, not that I know the reason why, but he just isn't at as many, doesn't seem to be out in the community as much, doesn't seem to be at as many events, meeting as many people. And I think that's why people don't know about him. But when you like Amy was saying, when you listen to him talk, I've heard him twice now, 2 or 3 times. And I've never been at an event where I haven't heard him talking about the hydroponics and things of that nature. And promoting it in a way that talks about this is the way of the future. This is how we save these farms. And he also goes on to talk about the food deserts in Kentucky and the areas where, there's a severe lack of fresh produce for people. Mm-hmm. And if these farms team up, how they can, build those, I guess a co-op that would, help people in the community, and that would be returned to them by the community, buying their goods and stuff like that.
It's a very holistic approach. Yes. I like that about Jim.
Yeah. So I really like him. I like, I like all the candidates. It's
Right.
definitely not for this race, not a personal.
Right.
thing.
If either of these gentlemen become our agricultural commissioner, I think we'll have a good person in that spot.
So if you're interested in finding out some more about Joe Trigg, you can look him up on his website at www.joetriggcandidate.com, and that's Trigg with 2 G's, Trigg. And again, we'll be posting that on the podcast site, so you can look those up from there if you need to. So that wraps up for agriculture. Let's move on to Auditor of Public Accounts. Amy, if you'd like to give us the rundown of what exactly does the Auditor of Public Accounts do?
Okay. So they are the head of the Division of Financial Audit. And that exists in our state government to protect the taxpayers' resources. They conduct audits of state agencies, fiscal courts, sheriffs, county clerks, circuit clerks, special districts, education cooperatives, and other entities. So any entity within our state that manages public funds, which is your tax dollars, they would be responsible for auditing and make sure that everything's above board. So this is the guy or girl that's going to make sure that our public funds are used correctly.
So the first candidate we want to talk about for Auditor of Public Accounts is Kelsey Hayes Coots. Kelsey is running for auditor, and she definitely has some leadership experience. What's been your impressions of Kelsey so far?
I like Kelsey. I think she brings a lot of positive energy to an area and a topic that's usually very dull for people if they pay attention to it at all. She's, very likely going to have a career now in politics rather than teaching, is my impression. However, I have a real problem with her lack of any kind of education or training in the financial world or in business practices. She is a relatively long time middle school teacher. That's where she honed her leadership skills by becoming like a building leader or a chair of a department in very short periods of time. She's been an exceptional activist in Frankfurt on behalf of teachers and public education over the past, 2 years.
Right. She's been involved with Kentucky 120, right?
Right. And I mean, just a phenomenal human being. I just question whether or not, she is going to be able to tackle this job without a lot of help. I like her drive. I like the things that she talks about when she talks about increasing transparency.
Right. That's my favorite part for sure.
When she talks about strengthening accountability. But those things are, those are very broad ideas. She does lay out some specifics as far as things like publishing the expenses of the auditor's office online, implementing a text email alert program. Although I don't know how many Kentuckians would want to receive texts from the auditor's office, but
I think there's a lot of excitement about auditor reports.
But she's trying. She's talking about things that are current as well as what would represent a future move in terms of the auditor's office.
One of the things in there that she does mention that I really like, when she talks about the website and text mail alerts and stuff like that, she talks about trying to utilize more infographics and videos, and I actually think that's really interesting because obviously one of the things we've alluded to here is that auditors' reports are not necessarily the most exciting thing that people
Right.
think, let me go find an auditor's
Right.
report to look at.
Right.
So I think the idea of trying to make the information into something that's a little more presentable and maybe catches people's interest a little better with like infographics and things like that. I like that idea. I think that's very interesting to bring that.
Absolutely. Anything that brings engagement, energy, excitement into, government and getting people to start paying attention to it. That's always a good thing. That's never a bad thing. Never.
But that would be applicable to many offices.
Right.
Not just this one. So that doesn't, to me, qualify as a reason to vote for her for auditor. I would vote for her for many things.
Yeah.
In a heartbeat.
Yeah, I'm totally there with you.
She's a really great person, and I think she will go far. I think she will be a great politician too.
Right.
But I would rather vote for her to a different office, I guess.
I think it might be good for her to, spend some time really explaining to us what qualifies her for that position of auditor. Since she doesn't have a degree in finance or really financial experience in like the banking industry or...
Right. And I think what makes this office so important this year is, the focus for the last 2 years has been on the pensions, and I have been contacted. I can't even tell you how many retired teachers have contacted me, begging for help in this regard on this race. And again, it's just that everybody wants the expert in the room, the watchdog, the person who knows where the bodies are buried, who can take any financial document and look through it and know instantly, okay, I know that's
is
not
off.
Yeah, it's not supposed to look this way, or I know these numbers, there's always a hint there that will clue them in. They need to look deeper type of a deal. And that's only going to happen with somebody that has years and years of experience and training.
Right.
And most people are at that point where they're like, we want that in the room.
Okay. So if you guys are looking for more information on Kelsey, you can find that at www.kelseyforkentucky, and that's Kelsey, KELSEYFOR, Kentucky, spelled out, .com. And our next candidate for public accounts is Sherry Donahue. Sherry Donahue is former military. She worked in the Navy, Naval Weapons Station. She has a lot of security background in systems and working with the FBI and cybersecurity. A lot of security experience, technical security experience, cybersecurity, as well as her work with the military in a number of areas. So I guess what's been your impressions with Sherry?
Sherry's a very impressive person. I was very impressed with her when I met her. She is no nonsense, and when she says that she won't let Bevan get away with it, I believe her.
I'd be afraid if a former naval FBI person said, "We're not going to let you get away with this."
Right. And I do think Sherry is a person that would work for the people of Kentucky over her own personal interests. She doesn't have a lot of experience as far as financial auditing, if I'm correct, right? It's more just
Cybersecurity,
that kind of stuff.
Computer.
So I don't know about that aspect of it, but as far as a person, she impressed me.
I mean, for the most part, I agree. I think, here again, we run into the same problem, is a background that doesn't match the job that you're going for. Cybersecurity is great. I feel like that's probably a step closer, a step in the right direction, but it's still not what we need it to be. During the KET debate between these folks, or forum, it wasn't really a debate, but when they were talking about things, it was always, well, the auditors will do this. And I'm like, isn't that your job as the auditor?
Correct.
And so if you're constantly passing things off to the staff, then how do you know that the staff isn't pulling something if you don't know what their job is, not just a description of it, but how to do it?
Correct.
So I think it would be hard to provide any kind of oversight to the staff if you yourself aren't up on the mechanics of the job.
Agreed.
But impressive. They're all impressive for different reasons and in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Qualified is a different story.
So if you're looking for more information on Sherry, you can find her or you can find more information at www.donahueforkentucky. That's DONAHUEFORKY.com. And again, we'll be putting these in the information for the podcast, so you can look it up there. So the third Democratic candidate for auditor is Chris Tobey. Chris Tobey is, he at one time, 22 years ago, was hired by the Kentucky State Auditor, Ed Hadgett, to look into Kentucky pensions. He has published a book on the pension problem here in Kentucky called Kentucky Fried Pensions, and has experience in finance, degrees in finance, and has been around for a while dealing with the pension problem in Kentucky. So, impressions of Mr. Tobey?
I'm very impressed with Mr. Tobey. In fact, when these blurbs come over the news about this happened with the pension and this happened in session, I'm like, I need to call Chris Tobey and ask him what this means because he's going to know. So, that's what I know about Chris, that he knows his stuff, that he knows what goes on in the auditor's office. He can tell you, the places where there needs to be a little more attention paid to what's going on. So, I'm very confident that Chris would have our backs and would protect our taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, honestly, my favorite thing about him is that at every place that he speaks, his opening line is, yes, I'm the guy that's been told for 22 years that I was blowing the pension problem up bigger than it really is.
Right.
And he's got the credentials to back it up. That's really, his LinkedIn page, good night, Irene. You're reading his background and you just keep scrolling, because this has been his life's work. I don't know. He's such an expert when it comes to this stuff that he's been, called to other states to help in other states with their problems. Now, I will say this. One point came up, and a very valid point on their KET debate. I think Renee Shaw was the one who pointed out. She said, the auditor's office doesn't just deal with pensions. And that's true. But instantly, he was able to name, okay, well, I want to look into this Brady Industries deal, which I can tell you, you both know that I've been screaming about that for 2 years. That's something I want to know a lot more about. Then he talked about some of the shenanigans with the Yum Center and what was going on there. Mm-hmm. Then he's also talked about various county level agencies. So he knows that it's not just about the pensions, but as he mentioned, that's also the biggest chunk of money that we have to worry about, the biggest investment that we have to worry about. And the longer it remains, the longer they allow the unfunded liability to grow, there could be issues. So, I think a lot of people feel confident when as soon as they hear his background. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he would be less transparent. I don't think he would be less accountable. I don't think he would be less safe, which are the three main talking points of the other two. Right. So,
He brings more to the table for sure.
I absolutely believe that.
Well, if you're looking for more information on Chris Toby, you can find that online at www.christobe, and that's Christobe.com. That wraps up our Democratic auditor candidates. And we'll move on to our final group of candidates we're going to talk about today. Those are the treasurer candidates. So, Amy, if you'd like to give us a rundown of what exactly does the treasurer of Kentucky do, because I guess it's probably different than the treasurer of a Little League team.
Well, actually, for all intents and purposes, it's about the same thing, only on a much bigger scale, because we're talking about the whole state of Kentucky.
Few more dollars, you're saying.
So the treasurer is the chief financial officer of the government of Kentucky and responsible for maintaining the state funds and acting as the state's bank. So really, they are the gateway of all the funding that goes through the state of Kentucky. So a very, very important position, and someone that we need to have a trusted person in this position.
So we have two Democratic candidates for this position. And first, we're going to talk about Michael Bowman. Michael Bowman has experience within local government and is a bank officer and a branch manager. So he's been responsible for financial portfolio and understanding of protecting critical investments, as well as financial ethics. Impressions?
I have never met Michael, so I don't have any personal impressions of him as a candidate. I have no problem with much of what he says on his different websites and such. His background is mostly in banking, so I would assume that he would be qualified to work as the treasurer. But I really don't know much about Michael, and I don't have any personal contact with him to know how I feel about him personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had the opportunity to meet him at the Campbell County Forum of all the candidates. I did speak with him one-on-one, and then also to listen to him get up and talk. He's, like all of these candidates, he's a lovely person who clearly is not a polished politician, who just wants to do a good job and be a good guy. I mean, you don't make it to branch manager of a U.S. bank by being a dud.
Right.
He knows what goes into the job of being a treasurer. But again, this is one of those jobs that falls into the category of, most people don't pay any attention to the work that gets done. It comes down to charisma of the candidate. And when we talk about him and then, next Josh Mers, it's a personality contest more than anything else.
Yeah. I will say that it looks like Michael Bowman, he spent time as a legislative assistant to the Louisville Metro Council.
Right, I did see that.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not lacking for community experience. He's not lacking for treasurer-related banking experience. I think it just depends. For these guys, it all comes down to who covers the most ground in retail politics and gets the best response.
Okay. So if you want to find out more information on Michael Bowman, you can find that at www.bowmanforkentucky.com. That's BOWMANFOR. Kentucky, all spelled out. And the other candidate we have for treasurer is Josh Mers. Josh is a Kentuckian, lifelong Kentuckian. He's from the Lexington area, and I know he has a insurance. I believe he's in insurance in Lexington and has a small business. I heard him say the other day he has a very small business. He has one employee beside himself. So impressions of Josh.
Josh is a nice guy. I like Josh a lot.
He's dynamic.
he has a great personality. He really connects with people.
Yes.
And he really cares about people. You can tell by the services that he's done in this community.
Mm-hmm.
He serves on the Lexington Human Rights Commission as their treasurer.
This isn't a position that would be new to him. Obviously, we're talking a much bigger scale, but it's something that he's done before.
Right.
But he was on the chair of the Lexington Fairness, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. And again, this one, fair or not fair, however you want to word it, I think just comes down to what I said before. Personality and retail politics. I think Josh wins that game.
I can say that I believe truthfully that if either of these guys got in, that we would be well served.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's why you have to take it to that level of what's going to be the determining factor for you as a voter.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I will say, on the surface, looking between Josh and Michael, I mean, Michael seems to have more financial background.
Right.
And more financial experience than Josh does. So I think that's definitely in there. So that's probably something that Josh wants to address, like we said with one of the other candidates. If you have an area that you're weak in, you need to address why you're more qualified than somebody who maybe has more experience in that applicable area.
Right, but as a small business owner, you got to wonder, he's probably his own treasurer.
Right.
So when you're talking about somebody that does this at a bank, are we just talking about a measure of magnitude, a measure of scale, that it's basically the same thing on a different scale? Are we talking about, and I'm going to tell you right now, financial stuff, probably my weakest area. So somebody else would have to tell me, is there a skill set there that I'm not cognizant of that working at a bank would get Michael Bowman over Josh Murs?
I mean, personally, the treasurer, the most qualifying factor for me is integrity. So I believe that either of these guys would pass the integrity test. So then you have to kind of go down, what's the next most important thing? And, are they going to be able to do the job? And I think either one of them could do it well.
Right.
So I don't know. Yes, I do believe that Michael does show a little bit more financial background, but it's not like Josh is completely lacking.
Right.
Right.
Okay. So if you want to find out more about Josh Murs, you can check out his website at joshmers.com. That's JOSHMERS.com. So on our next episode, we'll be talking about the remaining two offices up, Secretary of State and Governor, and the candidates of those. So you'll want to make sure to come back for that. And we also want to remind you that our upcoming meeting, our next meeting, is going to be on May 2nd at the Kenton County Public Library on Scott Street in Covington, and that starts at 6:30. So hopefully we will see you there. We're trying to get some really good speakers lined up, but we'll wait and tell you more about that later. If you are interested, for those of you who are members of Indivisible, Northern Kentucky District 4, you should have received communication about voting for our endorsements. We do plan on endorsing candidates in the primary, and so if you have not already voted, please do so. Again, you should have gotten an email, or you can access it through the members-only Facebook group for members of Indivisible Northern Kentucky. So please do that if you have not already, and we'll be announcing those endorsements in the near future. And final last piece, we really didn't do a rundown of what's happened in the legislature because we were busy covering candidates, but we did want to make sure everybody's aware that Governor Bevin has vetoed House Bill 358, which was the bill to give relief to pension payment relief to quasi institutions. He has vetoed that and has said that he will call a special session this summer.
Before July 1st.
Before July 1st is what he's saying. And he also said it's going to take one day
Right. And which is not how bills are
Right.
done.
And that's never happened in any special session.
Right.
So anyway, we'll keep you informed about that and let you know what we hear about that. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of Left in Kentucky. Thank you for joining us. This is Roberto Enriquez
Amy Ferguson.
And Dickerson.
saying goodbye.